Gray November morning. I'm sitting across from Warren Phillips, watching him flip through my promotion packet like it's a takeout menu. 5 years of overtime sheets, safety improvements, cost-saving initiatives, the whole Premier Industries contract that I basically built from scratch, all of it crammed into a 3-ring binder that he's barely glancing at. He looks up with that corporate smile that means this meeting's already over. Your work's been solid, Jake, but we're not seeing leadership potential yet. My name's Jake Thompson. I'm 43, been the operations foreman here at Midwest Manufacturing Solutions for 5 years. This conversation I'm about to tell you changed everything. Had to change everything, because at 43, you start realizing there aren't many second chances left. Leadership potential. I keep my face neutral, but inside I'm thinking about the 240-page operations manual I wrote when I started here. The preventive maintenance program that cut our downtime by 30%. The vendor relationships I rebuilt after the last guy left everything a mess. The automation integration plan I developed that saved us from the fate of the Akron plant. They closed last spring, sent 300 jobs overseas. I've kept Premier happy for 3 years, I say. Implemented the ISO 9001 compliance system that passed our most recent audit with 0 nonconformances. Our OEE numbers are the best in the region, even with the old equipment we're running. Warren nods like he's listening, but his eyes are already checking his phone. That's great technical work, but leadership means managing people, not just managing processes. Here's what he doesn't get. I've been managing people all along. When the CNC lathe throws error codes at 2 a.m., I'm the guy Danny calls because he knows I won't make him feel stupid for not knowing the solution. When our JIT delivery schedule goes sideways because a supplier screws up, Maria knows I'll have 3 backup options ready and won't blame her for something outside her control. When OSHA shows up unannounced, everything passes because I built those safety protocols from the ground up and trained everyone to understand why they matter. But none of that counts as leadership in Warren's world. In his world, leadership means sitting in meetings talking about metrics instead of understanding what creates those metrics. Warren, I say, leaning forward, give me a team to actually lead instead of having me fix everyone else's mistakes. Give me the authority to make decisions instead of just implementing yours. I'll show you leadership. He cuts me off with a wave of his hand. Look, Jake, with all of the talk about consolidation coming down from corporate, we need stability in key positions. You're too valuable where you are. There it is, the real reason. Not that I'm not ready for leadership, that I'm too useful as the guy who keeps the wheels from falling off. We'll revisit this next quarter, he continues. Right now, I need you to handle the Premier delivery issue. Their new quality requirements are causing bottlenecks in line 2, and they're threatening to audit our processes. Can you do that? I stand up. This is the moment where I usually say, sure, Warren, I'll handle it. Like I always do. Instead, I nod and walk toward the door. And Jake, Warren calls after me. Corporate's been asking about our readiness for the new automation initiatives. They want a full assessment by Friday. I know you've been thinking about that. I stop at the door. Friday's Tyler's championship game. Regional playoffs. I promised I'd be there early, help set up equipment, stay for the whole celebration if they won. I'll see what I can do, I say, and walk out. The corner office with the big windows overlooks the production floor. It's been empty for 6 months since they moved the last guy to corporate. That was supposed to be my office. Now there's talk that position might be eliminated entirely as part of the efficiency restructuring. Outside in the parking lot, I sit in my truck thinking about that word, consolidation. Every manufacturing worker over 40 knows what it means. They start with consolidation talk, then come efficiency studies, then automation upgrades, then pink slips for anyone making more than entry-level wages. I'm 43 years old. Tyler's got 2 years left of high school, then 4 years of engineering school if we can afford it. At my age, if they push me out of here, I'll be competing with 25-year-olds who'll work for half my salary and don't need health insurance for their families. That's when I make my decision. Actually, 2 decisions. First, I'm done being the invisible fix-it guy who makes everyone else look good. Second, I'm going to that baseball game. Let me back up and tell you how I got here. When I started at Midwest 5 years ago, this place was a disaster. The previous foreman quit without leaving a single note. No documentation, no vendor contacts, no process sheets. Nothing. The production floor was running on prayers and duct tape. Our biggest customer was threatening to pull their contract. Machines were breaking down daily because nobody understood the maintenance schedules. Half the equipment was so old that finding replacement parts meant calling salvage yards. I spent my first 3 months staying until 10 every night, rebuilding everything from scratch, created SOPs for every piece of equipment, mapped out the entire supply chain, built relationships with vendors who were ready to blacklist us, developed workarounds for equipment that should have been replaced a decade ago, but couldn't be because of budget constraints. Big Jim O'Brien was still working then. He's retired now, but he was our maintenance supervisor for 35 years. He pulled me aside one day during my second month and said, "Son, you're doing good work, but make sure people know it's your work. I've seen too many good operators get passed over because management didn't understand what they brought to the table." I should have listened to him then, but I was 41, grateful to have a steady job after the bearing plant in Cleveland closed down. I figured if I just kept my head down and did good work, advancement would follow. Instead, I kept quiet and did what needed doing. When Warren showed up 6 months later with his MBA and his quarterly efficiency reports, everything was running smooth. He took credit for the turnaround in his first management review, called it strategic process optimization and vendor relationship enhancement. That should have been my first warning sign. Then came Premier Industries, biggest potential contract we'd ever seen. Warren brought me the RFP on a Tuesday morning and said, "Figure out if we can handle this. I need an answer by Friday." I didn't just figure it out. I designed the entire production workflow from scratch, calculated capacity requirements down to the minute, negotiated with 3 new suppliers who could meet their quality standards, restructured our quality control process to handle their inspection requirements, developed contingency plans for every possible bottleneck. I spent 2 months on that proposal working nights and weekends while Warren focused on strategic oversight and stakeholder communication. Warren presented my technical proposal to their executives, smiled for the cameras at the signing ceremony, got a $5,000 bonus for securing the premier partnership and innovative process design. I got a cost of living raise that didn't even cover the gas for driving in early every day. But I told myself it was worth it. Tyler was starting high school, already talking about engineering school. Lisa's job at the medical clinic was steady, but wouldn't cover college tuition. We needed my advancement here, and I figured if I just kept proving my value, recognition would follow. Funny thing is, Warren did recognize my value, just not the way I expected. Every time something went wrong, which wasn't often thanks to my systems, Warren would delegate it to me. Supplier delay? Jake's got the vendor relationships to sort that out. Equipment breakdown? Get Jake down there, he knows those machines better than anyone. Customer complaint? Jake's our technical expert for quality issues. I became the go-to solution for every crisis, which meant I was essential, which also meant I was stuck. You can't promote the guy who fixes everything because then who's going to fix everything? Sitting in that truck after the promotion meeting, I realized Warren had been playing this game for 5 years. Keep Jake where he is, take credit for what Jake builds, and everybody wins. Everybody except Jake. My phone buzzed. Text from Warren. Premier shipment delayed due to line 2 quality issues. Need you to coordinate with suppliers and quality control as soon as possible. Also need that automation assessment before you leave today. I looked at that message for a long time. Usually, I'd already be on the phone with 3 different vendors figuring out how to expedite delivery while maintaining quality standards, making Warren look good to Ray Martinez, our regional director. Instead, I put the phone in my glove compartment and drove home. Tyler was in the garage working on his dirt bike when I got there. Kid's got good hands. Reminds me of myself at that age, back when I thought understanding how things worked was enough to get ahead. We've been rebuilding that old Yamaha together since last spring. "Dad, check this out." He showed me the carburetor he'd been cleaning. Got all the jets clear. Should run better now. "Looks good, buddy. You ready for the game tomorrow night?" His face lit up. "You're coming? Really?" That question hit harder than it should have. How many times had I promised to be there, then called at the last minute with some work emergency that couldn't wait? "Wouldn't miss it," I said. And I meant it. We spent the next hour installing that carburetor. Tyler did most of the work while I guided him through it, teaching him the way Big Jim taught me. Let them figure it out. Just keep them from making expensive mistakes. "Dad," Tyler said as he tightened the last connection, "what if I don't get into engineering school? What if I'm not smart enough?" I stopped what I was doing. Where's that coming from? Kids at school, their parents have college degrees, good jobs. Some of them are already taking AP classes I don't even understand. What if I can't compete? I looked at my son, 17 years old, rebuilding an engine with the patience and precision of someone twice his age, worried about not being smart enough. "Tyler, intelligence isn't just about book learning. You see how this carburetor works, how all the parts fit together, how changing one thing affects everything else. That's systems thinking. That's engineering. He nodded, but I could see the doubt still there. Besides, I said, your old man's been competing with college graduates for 5 years. Sometimes experience and common sense beat fancy degrees. My phone kept buzzing from inside the house, but I didn't check it. For once, Warren's emergency could wait. At dinner, Lisa asked about the promotion meeting. I told her what happened. Warren's response, my decision to change approach. What does that mean exactly? She asked. Means I'm done doing invisible work for people who don't appreciate it. She nodded slowly. Lisa's smart. She could see where this was heading. Jake, you know I support you, but we can't afford for you to lose this job. Not with Tyler's future on the line. I'm not going to lose my job. I'm going to make them realize what they'd be losing. Tyler looked up from his plate. What's invisible work? Good question. It's when you do important things that keep everything running, but nobody notices because they only pay attention when things go wrong. Like when I clean my room and nobody says anything, but when it's messy, everyone complains. Exactly like that. Tyler's team won that night, 7-4. He went 2 for 3 and drove in the winning run. Afterwards, he ran over to the fence where Lisa and I were standing, uniform dirty, grinning like he'd just won the World Series. Did you see that hit, Dad? I saw it, buddy. Perfect swing through the zone. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Like I'd been where I was supposed to be, instead of where someone else needed me to be. My phone showed 42 missed calls and 17 text messages. Those 42 missed calls were just the beginning of what I'd later think of as the test. I didn't check them until Saturday morning. Warren, Ray Martinez from Regional, Premier's production manager, 3 different suppliers, and 2 calls from someone at corporate I'd never heard of. The messages got more desperate as the night went on. Jake, where are you? Premier's quality audit is Monday. We've got cascade failures in line 2. This could cost us the contract. This is Ray Martinez. Corporate's asking questions about operational readiness. Call me. The last message was Warren at 11:47 p.m. Jake, I know you're upset about the promotion, but we can't let that affect operations. This is bigger than both of us. I deleted every message without responding. Saturday morning, instead of driving to the plant like I had every weekend for 5 years, I drove to Big Jim O'Brien's place. He lives 10 minutes away in a house that looks like mine will in 20 years. Paid off, well-maintained, with a garage full of tools and motorcycle parts. I found him rebuilding a Harley transmission, parts laid out on a clean workbench in perfect order. Jake Thompson, he said, wiping grease off his hands with a shop rag. Heard you had some excitement yesterday. Word travels fast in manufacturing. Warren finally showed his hand, Jim. He nodded toward 2 lawn chairs next to his workbench. We sat down with coffee mugs that had seen better decades, and I told him about the promotion meeting, about my decision to stop being the invisible fix-it guy. Jim listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding like he'd heard this story before. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, studying the transmission case like it held answers. You know what your real problem is? He finally said. What's that? You've been too good at your job. Made everyone else lazy. He took a sip of coffee. I've seen this dance before, son. Back in the 80s when they started automating the foundry operations, management kept the old-timers who knew the workarounds, let the systems depend on their knowledge, then acted surprised when those guys became irreplaceable. So what happened to them? Some got promoted eventually. Most got pushed out when they brought in the new automated systems. Company decided it was cheaper to retrain college kids than pay experienced operators what they were worth. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter. You think that's what's happening here? I think Warren's got you right where he wants you. You're doing his job and your job, making him look good to his bosses, and he's paying you half what you're worth. Jim leaned forward. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Stop being so good at everyone else's job, I guess. That's one approach. But here's what you need to understand. They're going to test you first. See if you really mean it, or if you're just having a bad week. He was right. My phone had been buzzing all morning with increasingly urgent messages. The thing is, Jim continued, management types like Warren, they don't understand the work. They see problems in terms of phone calls they have to make, meetings they have to attend, reports they have to write. They don't see the 1,000 little decisions that prevent those problems from happening. So when I stop making those decisions, everything goes to pieces real fast. And then you find out if they value what you do or if they just want someone to blame. I drove home thinking about what Jim had said. Lisa was in the kitchen when I walked in, reading the Sunday paper and drinking coffee. Plant called 3 times this morning, she said without looking up. I told them you were busy. Thanks. She folded the paper and looked at me. Jake, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about invisible work. Yeah, I do invisible work too. Keep this house running, manage Tyler's schedule, handle the bills, coordinate everything so you can focus on your job. Most of the time, nobody notices unless something goes wrong. I sat down across from her. I notice, I know you do. But the point is, maybe it's time people learn to notice what we both do. Monday morning, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I showed up at exactly 8 a.m. instead of 7:30. Clocked in right on time while half the day shift watched me walk across the floor. Danny Walsh was the first to approach me. He's our senior technician, been here 12 years, knows these machines better than the engineers who designed them. But he'd gotten used to calling me whenever something looked wrong. "Jake, we've got problems," he said, pointing toward line 2. 3 stations showing hydraulic pressure drops, quality controls flagging dimensional variations, and Premier's audit team shows up in 2 hours. Usually, I'd already be walking toward the problem, running diagnostics in my head, calling suppliers to expedite replacement parts. Instead, I poured myself coffee from the break room. "What's the troubleshooting protocol say?" I asked. Danny blinked. "The what?" "Standard operating procedure. Section 4 of the maintenance manual. Hydraulic system diagnostics." He looked confused. "Jake, I don't know where that is. You always just tell us what to do." "Shared drive, manufacturing folder. All 240 pages of documentation I wrote when I started here. Everything you need to diagnose hydraulic issues, contact information for emergency parts suppliers, escalation procedures for quality problems." I walked away, leaving him standing there. By 10 a.m., my phone was ringing every 10 minutes. Warren mostly, but also Maria Santos from Supply Chain Coordination. She's good at her job, understands vendor relationships better than most people twice her age, but she'd gotten used to me making the tough calls. "Jake, Premier's quality manager, is asking about corrective actions for the dimensional variations. They want a full response plan by noon, and Warren says he doesn't understand the technical details. Forward them the quality control manual. Section 12 covers non-conformance response procedures. Everything they need is documented, but you always handle Premier's technical issues directly. They expect to talk to you." Not today. Here's what I was learning. I hadn't just been doing my job for 5 years. I'd been doing everyone else's job too, making decisions that should have been made by people with the authority and responsibility to make them. By noon, the crisis had escalated beyond the plant level. Premier's audit team found multiple issues that should have been addressed before they arrived. Quality documentation was scattered across different systems. Maintenance records weren't up to date. The corrective action plan that Warren tried to present made no technical sense. Ray Martinez called me directly at 1 p.m. "Jake, I need you in my office. Now." The drive to regional headquarters gave me 20 minutes to think about what Jim had said. They were testing me, seeing if I really meant it or if I was just having a bad week. Ray's office overlooks the interstate, all glass and productivity charts covering every wall. Our plant's numbers were always at the top of those charts, and he knew why. "Sit down, Jake. Help me understand what happened today." I told him everything. The promotion meeting, Warren's pattern of taking credit while avoiding responsibility, 5 years of doing work I wasn't getting paid to do, the decision to stop handling problems that weren't technically my responsibility. Ray listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. "Premier's talking about suspending our certification pending a full operational review," he said when I finished. "That's a $12 million contract." "I know. So you're willing to let that happen to make a point?" "I'm willing to let that happen to find out what I'm actually worth around here." He leaned back in his chair. "Warren says you're being insubordinate, refusing direct orders." "Warren hasn't given me any direct orders. He's asked me to handle problems that are outside my job description, and I've referred him to the documented procedures for handling those problems." "Procedures you wrote." "That's right." Ray was quiet for a long time, staring out at the highway. I could see him calculating the cost of losing Premier, the cost of losing me, the cost of admitting that his plant manager didn't understand his own operations. "What do you want, Jake?" That was the question I'd been waiting 5 years for someone to ask. But now that he was asking, I realized I needed to be careful about my answer. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Tyler's college fund, Lisa's security, and the future of everyone at the plant who'd been depending on me to keep things running. I want to do the job I've already been doing, but with the title and authority that goes with it. Director of Operations, reporting directly to you. Full control over production scheduling, quality systems, vendor relationships, and staffing decisions. Compensation? Double what I'm making now. 3 days remote per week. And I want to implement a formal knowledge transfer program so we're not dependent on any one person having all the answers. Ray made notes on his legal pad. "What about Warren?" Warren's good at the political side. Quarterly reviews, corporate communications, keeping upper management happy. Let him focus on that. But operational decisions need to be made by someone who understands operations. And if I say no, I thought about Tyler, about the conversation we'd had about not being smart enough, about Lisa's invisible work keeping our family together, about all the guys on the floor who'd been counting on me to fight battles they couldn't fight themselves. Then I'll train Danny and Maria to handle as much as they can, document everything else, and give you 2 weeks' notice. Ray was quiet for maybe 30 seconds, which felt like an hour. Premier's quality manager is coming back Thursday for a follow-up audit. Can you get us ready for that? Give me the authority and I'll have everything compliant by Wednesday. Consider it done. He stood up and shook my hand. Welcome to management, Jake. Driving back to the plant, I called Big Jim. How'd it go? He asked. I think I just got promoted. Good. Now comes the hard part. What's that? Figuring out how to be the kind of leader you wish Warren had been. Big Jim was right about the hard part. Walking back into the plant Tuesday morning as director of operations felt like putting on clothes that almost fit. The title was mine, the authority was real, but I still had to prove I deserved both. Warren was waiting in what used to be his office, now mine. He looked like a man who'd spent the night reconsidering his life choices. Ray called, he said without preamble. Congratulations. Thanks. I set my coffee down on the desk that had been empty for 6 months. We need to talk about how this is going to work. Warren shifted in his chair. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out if he should be apologetic, angry, or cooperative. He went with apologetic. Jake, I want you to know I never meant to hold you back. I just thought you were more comfortable in the technical role. Here's how I see it, I said. You're good at managing up, keeping corporate happy, hitting your quarterly numbers on paper. I'm good at managing down, making sure the work actually gets done right. We can either work together or make each other miserable. What do you need from me? Stay out of operational decisions. Don't make commitments to customers without checking with me first. And when people ask about the Premier turnaround, make sure they know I'm the one who fixed it. He nodded, but I could see the resistance in his eyes. Warren had spent 5 years being the guy with all the answers. Learning to not have answers was going to be harder for him than it had been for me to stop giving them. There's something else, I said. Corporate's been pushing the automation assessment. They want to know which positions can be eliminated once the new systems come online. Warren's face went pale. Eliminated? That's what consolidation means, Warren. They're looking at labor costs, comparing our numbers to plants running automated systems. Ray wants a full analysis by next month. I let that sink in while I pulled out the files I'd been thinking about since my conversation with Big Jim. The automation assessment wasn't just about improving efficiency. It was about identifying who was replaceable and who wasn't. I'll need your help with something, I said. We're going to implement a knowledge transfer program. Everything that exists in people's heads needs to get documented, cross-trained, systematized. Why? Because the guys who make themselves indispensable by hoarding knowledge are the first ones corporate targets for replacement. But the guys who make their whole team more capable, those are the ones who become managers. Warren was quiet for a long time. You're talking about changing the whole culture here. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The first crisis came Wednesday morning. Premier's follow-up audit was scheduled for Thursday, and I had 24 hours to fix problems that had been building for months. I called Danny and Maria into the conference room, along with 3 other operators who'd been working around broken systems instead of fixing them. Here's the situation, I said. Premier's audit tomorrow determines whether we keep a $12 million contract. If we fail, corporate starts looking at this plant as a liability instead of an asset. Danny raised his hand. What do you need us to do? I need you to stop waiting for me to solve problems and start solving them yourselves. I spent the next 2 hours walking them through decision-making processes I'd been handling alone for 5 years. When to escalate quality issues, how to negotiate with suppliers, which corners you could cut safely, and which ones would get people hurt. Danny, you've been watching me troubleshoot hydraulic systems for 3 years. What's the first thing you check when pressure drops in line 2? Filter contamination, then seal integrity, then pump capacity. Right? So why do you call me instead of just checking those things? He looked uncomfortable. Because what if I'm wrong? What happens if you're wrong? We lose production time, maybe damage equipment. And what happens if you don't make the decision at all? We lose production time while waiting for you to show up and tell us to check the filters. I could see the light going on. From now on, you check the filters first. If that doesn't solve it, you check seals. If that doesn't work, then you call me. But chances are, you'll fix 90% of these problems without needing help. Maria had similar realizations about vendor management. She'd been deferring to me on supplier negotiations because she was afraid of making commitments the company couldn't keep. But she knew our capacity better than anyone, understood our quality requirements, had better relationships with half our vendors than I did. Maria, when Hartwell calls tomorrow demanding expedited delivery, what do you tell them? That I need to check with you first? Wrong. You tell them you can expedite the order for a 20% surcharge, delivery Friday instead of Monday, but they need to confirm in writing within 2 hours, or the standard schedule applies. What if they say no? Then they get standard delivery and learn that expedited service costs extra. What if they say yes? We make extra money and they get what they want. Exactly, you don't need me to make that decision. You need authority to make that decision. By Thursday morning, we were ready. Premier's quality manager arrived at 8 a.m. with a checklist that would have terrified Warren 6 months ago. Instead, he got a tour led by Danny, who explained every system modification we'd implemented. Maria walked him through our vendor qualification process and showed him real-time quality data that most companies would kill for. I spent the audit in my office, available for questions but not running the show. That was the test. Not whether I could impress Premier's people, but whether my team could impress them without me. They passed. Not just passed. They exceeded every requirement and got compliments on processes that other plants were struggling to implement. Premier's quality manager stopped by my office before leaving. Impressive turnaround, Jake. 6 months ago, we were ready to pull this contract. Now you're setting the standard for our other suppliers. Danny Walsh and Maria Santos deserve the credit. They're the ones making it happen day to day. He shook his head. Good systems don't run themselves. Someone has to build them, maintain them, continuously improve them. That's leadership. After he left, I sat in my office thinking about what he'd said. For 5 years, I'd been doing the work, but not getting credit for it. Now I was getting credit, but the real work was being done by people I'd trained. Maybe that was the difference between being essential and being a leader. Ray called me that afternoon. Premier's singing your praises. They want to discuss expanding the contract. Danny and Maria handled the audit. They should be in on those discussions. You sure about that? These are big picture conversations, strategic decisions. Ray, the people making our products should understand why we're making them. The people solving daily problems should help plan long-term solutions. That's how you build a system that works without depending on any one person, including you, especially me. That evening, I stopped by Big Jim's garage again. He was working on the same Harley transmission, but now it was fully assembled and purring like new. Heard you passed your test, he said. Seems like it. So what's next? I told him about the automation assessment, about corporate's pressure to reduce labor costs, about the challenge of making people more valuable instead of more replaceable. Jim wiped his hands on a shop rag and looked at me seriously. You know what killed the foundry guys back in the 80s? What? They fought the automation instead of learning to work with it. Insisted their way was better, refused to adapt, made themselves obstacles instead of solutions. So what should I do differently? Don't fight the machines. Figure out how to make them make your people more valuable, not less valuable. The plants that survived automation were the ones where operators became technicians, technicians became engineers, and engineers became problem solvers. That weekend, Tyler and I finished rebuilding his dirt bike engine. Complete teardown and restoration, everything we'd learned together over the past year. When we fired it up, it ran smoother than when he first got it. Dad, Tyler said, I've been thinking about what you said. About competing with college graduates. Yeah, maybe the point isn't to compete with them. Maybe it's to learn what they know and combine it with what we know. Smart kid, what do you mean? Like you understand how manufacturing works from doing it. If I learn engineering in school, together we'd know more than either of us knows alone. I looked at my 17-year-old son, who just articulated a business philosophy that most executives never figure out. Tyler, that's exactly right. The future belongs to people who can bridge different kinds of knowledge. Monday morning, I had a different kind of conversation with Warren. Instead of talking about who was responsible for what, we talked about how to prepare everyone for what was coming. Corporate wants the automation assessment, Warren said. They're expecting recommendations for workforce reduction. They're going to get recommendations for workforce development instead. What do you mean? Every job that gets automated creates a new job, maintaining the automation. Every process that gets digitized needs someone who understands both the process and the technology. We're not going to eliminate people, we're going to eliminate limitations. Warren looked skeptical. You think corporate will buy that? I think corporate wants profitable operations. If we can show them how to increase productivity while developing talent instead of destroying it, they'll listen. And if they don't, then we'll have the best trained workforce in the industry, and other companies will be happy to hire them. 2 weeks later, Ray called me into his office with an offer I hadn't expected. Corporate wants to promote you again, he said. Vice President of Operations for the entire region. You'd be overseeing all 6 plants, working directly with corporate on strategic planning. What about my team here? Danny becomes Operations Director. Maria gets Supply Chain Manager. Warren stays as Plant Manager but focuses on administration and corporate relations. I thought about Tyler, about the conversations we'd been having about different kinds of knowledge, about the automation assessment and the challenge of making people more valuable instead of more replaceable. I'll take it, I said. But I want to pilot the workforce development program here first. Prove it works before we roll it out regionally. Deal. That night, I told Lisa and Tyler about the promotion over dinner. Does this mean more travel? Lisa asked. Some, but it also means more flexibility to work from home, more control over my schedule. Tyler looked up from his plate. Will you still have time to work on motorcycles? That's non-negotiable, buddy. Some things are more important than any job. Good, he said, because Mrs. Rodriguez asked if I could look at her husband's bike. I told her I'd need my consultant. I laughed. Your consultant? You taught me how to do it. But you also taught me when to ask for help. Later that evening, I was in the garage organizing tools when Tyler found me. Dad, I've been thinking about that automation stuff you mentioned. What about it? What if the answer isn't choosing between people and machines? What if it's teaching people to be better than machines at the things machines can't do? I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. Like what? Like solving problems nobody's seen before. Like making decisions when you don't have enough information. Like teaching other people to get better at their jobs. Tyler, that's the smartest thing anyone said to me all month. I learned it from watching you. That's when I realized the most important thing I'd been teaching him wasn't technical skills or work ethic. It was how to think about problems, how to develop people, how to create value instead of just protecting it. The invisible work had become visible, but more than that, it was becoming transferable. And that made all the difference. 6 months into the VP role, I was driving back from the Detroit plant when Danny called. Not with a crisis this time, but with news. Jake, remember that workforce development program you had us pilot? Corporate wants to roll it out to all 12 plants in the Midwest region. They're calling it the Thompson model. I had to pull over. They're naming it after me. Ray Martinez presented it to the board last week, showed them how we increase productivity 38% while reducing turnover to almost zero. They want you to present it at the National Operations Conference in Chicago. After I hung up, I sat in that rental car thinking about how far we'd come. 2 years ago, I was the invisible guy fixing everyone else's mistakes. Now, I was developing programs that other companies wanted to copy. But the real measure of success wasn't the recognition. It was what happened when I wasn't there. The week before, there'd been a major equipment failure at the Akron plant, the one they'd almost shut down 3 years ago. Instead of calling me, the plant manager called Danny. Instead of flying in consultants, Danny drove over with Maria and 2 of our best technicians. They had the line running again in 18 hours using techniques we'd developed for dealing with obsolete equipment. That's when I knew the system was working. The national conference was held at a downtown Chicago hotel, the kind of place where manufacturing executives pretend they're not worried about overseas competition and automation replacing their workforces. I was scheduled to present right after the keynote on Industry 4. Zero and the Future of American Manufacturing. The keynote speaker was a consultant from Boston who'd never run a production line, talking about how artificial intelligence and robotics would eliminate low-value human tasks. He showed slides full of productivity charts and cost projections, painting a picture of factories that ran themselves. During the Q&A, a plant manager from Ohio raised his hand. That sounds great in theory, but what do we do with the people who currently perform those tasks? Some of these guys have 20, 30 years of experience. The consultant's answer was polite but clear. Workforce right-sizing is always challenging, but necessary for competitive positioning. Right-sizing. Corporate speak for firing people whose only mistake was getting older in a job they'd mastered. When my turn came, I scrapped the PowerPoint presentation I'd prepared and talked from experience instead. 2 years ago, my plant was facing the same pressures you're all dealing with. Aging workforce. Overseas competition, corporate demands for automation and efficiency improvements. We had a choice, eliminate experience or leverage it. I told them about Danny, who went from calling me for every hydraulic problem to training technicians at 3 different plants. About Maria, who went from processing purchase orders to designing supply chain partnerships that saved the company $2 million last year. The question isn't whether automation will change manufacturing. It will. The question is whether we use that change to eliminate human knowledge or amplify it. I walked them through the numbers. Plants that implemented our workforce development model averaged 35% productivity gains in the first year. Employee retention rates improved by 60%. Most importantly, when new automated systems came online, installation and training times were cut in half because operators understood both the old processes and the new technology. The future doesn't belong to companies that can replace people with machines, I said. It belongs to companies that can teach people to work with machines in ways that create value neither could achieve alone. After the presentation, I was surrounded by plant managers asking for details, contact information, implementation timelines. But the conversation that mattered most happened later that evening. A woman approached me at the hotel bar, Sarah Williams, operations director at an automotive parts company in Tennessee. "Your presentation hit home," she said. "I've got a plant full of guys who've been doing the same jobs for 15 years. Corporate wants me to automate half the line and lay off 30 people. Most of them are over 50. What's stopping you?" Same thing that stopped you, I'm guessing. These guys know things that aren't in any manual. They can hear when a machine's about to fail, spot quality problems before they become defects, solve problems that would stump an engineer. So teach them to teach others. How do I convince corporate that's more valuable than just cutting payroll? I thought about my conversation with Ray 2 years ago, about Tyler's insights on combining different kinds of knowledge, about Big Jim's warnings from the foundry closures. Show them the real cost of losing institutional knowledge. When experienced operators leave, they take decades of problem-solving expertise with them. Replacing that knowledge costs more than preserving it. 6 months later, Sarah called to tell me her plant had implemented a modified version of our program. Instead of laying off 30 people, they'd retrain them as automation technicians and quality specialists. Productivity was up, defects were down, and corporate was talking about expanding the facility instead of closing it. Best part is, she said, the guys who are most worried about being replaced are now the ones training new hires on the automated systems. They went from feeling obsolete to feeling essential. That conversation reminded me of something Big Jim had said about the foundry workers in the 80s. The ones who survived weren't the ones who fought the changes or the ones who gave up. They were the ones who learned to be more valuable after automation than they'd been before it. During Tyler's senior year, he started talking seriously about college and career plans. One evening, we were working on a neighbor's motorcycle, a vintage Honda that had been sitting in a garage for 10 years. "Dad, I've been thinking about engineering school," he said as he cleaned carbon deposits from the pistons. "But I'm also thinking about the motorcycle repair business. You don't have to choose one or the other." "What do you mean?" "Go to engineering school. Learn the theory, the math, the new technologies. But keep working on motorcycles. By the time you graduate, you'll understand both the old mechanical systems and the new electronic ones. That combination makes you valuable to companies developing the next generation of equipment." Tyler nodded slowly. "Like how you knew the old manufacturing processes when they brought in the new quality systems." "Exactly. The future belongs to people who can bridge different worlds of knowledge. What if I want to start my own business eventually? Then you'll understand your customers' problems from the ground up and you'll have the engineering knowledge to design better solutions." That's a powerful combination. The following spring, Tyler got accepted to the State University's engineering program with a partial scholarship. More importantly, he had saved enough from motorcycle repairs to cover most of his remaining costs. "I want to keep the repair business going part-time during college," he told Lisa and me over dinner. "Jimmy Rodriguez wants to be my partner. He's good with electrical systems, and I'm better with mechanical. Together we can handle anything." Lisa smiled. "Sounds like someone learned about leveraging different strengths instead of trying to do everything yourself." Tyler grinned. "I had a good teacher. That fall, I got a call that brought everything full circle. Big Jim was in the hospital, nothing serious, just some routine surgery, but he wanted to see me. I found him in a hospital bed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, but still sharp as ever. Heard about the national conference, he said. Heard about the Thompson model. Pretty fancy name for common sense. It was your advice, Jim. All of it, maybe. But you're the one who figured out how to scale it, how to teach other people to teach other people. That's the difference between good operators and good leaders. We talked for an hour about the changes in manufacturing, about the challenges still ahead, about the next generation of workers coming up through the system. You know what I'm most proud of? Jim asked as visiting hours were ending. What's that? 30 years from now, when some young operator is struggling with the same problems you faced, there'll be systems in place to help them. Documentation, training programs, career paths that don't depend on one person being willing to work themselves to death. That's the goal. No, Jake, that's the legacy. Driving home from the hospital, I thought about invisible work and visible impact, about the difference between being essential and being influential, about the long arc from fixing problems to preventing them. My phone rang, Danny's name on the screen. Jake, sorry to bother you, but we've got a situation with the new Hartford Industries contract. Their quality specs are completely different from anything we've seen before. 2 years ago, I would have turned around and driven back to handle it myself. A year ago, I would have walked Danny through the solution over the phone. Instead, I said, "What's your assessment of the situation?" "Well, their specifications are tighter than Premier's, but the material requirements are similar. I'm thinking we could adapt the quality protocol from the Williams project, modify the inspection intervals, and bring in Maria to restructure the supply chain for the specialty alloys they need." "Sounds like you've got it figured out." "Yeah, but what if I'm wrong about the protocol adaptation?" "What's the worst that could happen?" "We might need to adjust the process after the first production run, maybe extend the timeline by a week." "And what's the best that could happen?" "We establish ourselves as the go-to supplier for high-precision components, potentially worth $15 million in additional contracts over the next 3 years." "Danny, that's exactly the kind of strategic thinking this company needs. Trust your analysis." "Thanks, Jake. I'll keep you posted on how it goes." After I hung up, I realized something had changed in that conversation. Danny wasn't calling me because he couldn't solve the problem. He was calling because he wanted confirmation that his solution was sound. The difference was subtle, but important. He was thinking like a leader, not like someone waiting for instructions. That evening, Tyler called from college. He was 3 months into his freshman year, maintaining a 3.0, 8 GPA while running his motorcycle repair business out of his dorm parking lot. "Dad, I wanted to tell you something. My engineering professor was talking about manufacturing systems today, and he mentioned your workforce development program. Said it was being studied as a model for human-machine collaboration." "How'd you feel about that?" "Proud, but also like I understood something my classmates didn't." "What's that?" "They think engineering is about designing systems that work perfectly on paper. But you taught me that the best systems are designed around the people who have to make them work in reality." That's a pretty sophisticated insight for a freshman. Well, I had some help figuring it out. 6 months later, I was back at Big Jim's house. He was fully recovered and working on a new project, restoring a 1947 Indian chief that had been in pieces for 30 years. "How's the new generation coming along?" he asked as we worked on the engine. "Better than I expected. Danny's running 3 plants now. Maria's been promoted to regional supply chain director. Even Warren's doing good work. Turns out when you let him focus on what he's good at, he's actually pretty effective." "And Tyler, Dean's List both semesters. The motorcycle business is paying for his books and spending money. He's talking about starting an engineering club focused on restoration and custom work." Jim smiled. "Kids learning to combine old knowledge with new applications. That's the future right there." We worked in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet you get when 2 people understand the rhythm of mechanical work. "You know what you accomplished, Jake," Jim said as he adjusted the valve timing. "What's that?" "You proved that experience doesn't have to be disposable. That knowledge can be shared without being lost. That getting older in a job can make you more valuable instead of more vulnerable. I had good examples to follow. Maybe. But you're the one who figured out how to scale those examples, how to turn individual wisdom into institutional knowledge." As the sun was setting, Tyler arrived with his girlfriend Sarah, both of them in college sweatshirts and work boots. Tyler had offered to help finish the Indian restoration as his spring break project. "Mr. O'Brien," Tyler said, "Dad's been telling me about the foundry closures back in the 80s. About the operators who survived and the ones who didn't." Jim nodded. Different world back then. Companies saw automation as a way to eliminate people instead of elevate them. "What changed?" Jim looked at me, then back at Tyler. "Leaders like your dad figured out that the real competition isn't between people and machines. It's between companies that waste human potential and companies that develop it." That night, driving home with Tyler and Sarah, I thought about the long arc from invisible work to lasting impact. about the difference between solving problems and building systems that prevent problems, about the responsibility that comes with influence and the satisfaction that comes from watching other people succeed. "Dad," Tyler said from the passenger seat, "I've been thinking about what Mr. O'Brien said, about developing human potential instead of wasting it. Yeah, I want to do that someday. Not just design better machines, but figure out how to help people and machines work better together. That's noble work. I learned it from watching you." The next morning was Saturday. No early calls from plants in crisis, no weekend emergencies that couldn't wait until Monday. Tyler was in the garage working on Sarah's car, teaching her to change oil and check belts, sharing knowledge instead of hoarding it. I poured coffee and watched them work, thinking about cycles and circles, about how the lessons we learn get passed down and modified and improved by each generation. My phone buzzed with a text from Danny. Hartford project exceeded all specifications. They want to discuss a long-term partnership. Thanks for teaching me to think it through instead of just executing orders. I typed back, that's what good leaders do. They develop people who don't need them anymore. The truth is, the work was never really invisible. People saw it, valued it, depended on it. What was invisible was the impact. The way that teaching someone to solve problems creates a ripple effect that touches people you'll never meet, solves problems you'll never see. That's the real difference between being essential and being influential. Essential people are hard to replace. Influential people create systems that don't need replacing. Tyler looked up from under the hood of Sarah's car. "Dad, want to help us figure out this timing issue? Sarah wants to learn how to diagnose engine problems." I walked over to where they were working, coffee in hand, ready to teach someone else something I'd learned from someone else who'd learned it from someone else. That's how knowledge survives. Not by being hoarded, but by being shared. Not by staying invisible, but by making others visible. That's the work that really matters, and it never ends.